Hello class, and welcome to Notes 5.8, Solve Inequalities by Multiplying and Dividing. By now, you're getting the hang of doing inverse operations. Remember, you're simply doing the opposite of order of operations because you're trying to undo the order of operations. Now, the difference here, multiplication and division can be very tricky because occasionally you have to change the inequality sign. So let's go ahead and take a look. Don't forget to write down our California Standard AF 1.1. And then we have two properties, which you must write down both these properties. Multiplying or dividing each side of an inequality by a positive number produces an equivalent inequality. So notice we had 5x is less than 10. Divide both sides by 5 and you end up with x is less than 2. That's the same as you've always done it. Now, this second part of the property is really important. Multiplied or divided each side of an inequality by a negative number reverses the direction of the inequality symbol. I would put that and highlight it, underline it, circle it, whatever you need to do to remind yourself of that. And now it will produce an equivalent inequality. So negative 5x is less than 10. I need to divide both sides by negative 5, which notice I had less than, now I have greater than. So it means x is greater than negative 2. And this is where the check really comes in handy, and we'll take a look at this when we get to some of our student practice and teacher examples. But if I find a number that is greater than negative 2, for example 0, negative 5 times 0 is less than 10, which is true. If I had my sign the other way, if I forgot to change my sign, I would need to pick a number that was less than negative 2, for example, negative 3. Negative 5 times negative 3 is positive 15, and positive 15 is not less than 10. So that's where you really want to be careful. So watch out for this. That's the only big difference. Everything else in this lesson is exactly the same as we've been doing. The only thing different is we need to change that inequality sign. So let's look at teacher example 1, solve the inequality using multiplication. So I have m over negative 4 is greater than 6. So I want to undo that division. I see a division symbol right here. I want to undo it by multiplying to both sides, and I want to multiply negative 4 to both sides. Now remember, if I'm multiplying or dividing both sides by a negative, I need to change the inequality. Okay, so as we can see, we have multiplied both sides by negative 4, which we can cross out the negative 4, dividing by negative 4 and the multiplying by negative 4. They've canceled out. We can bring the m down on the left side of the equation, and then 6 times negative 4 is negative 24. Notice I remembered to change the sign because I was multiplying both sides by a negative. And again, this is where the check really comes in handy. Having that check is how you can make sure you changed your sign. The first part when you're checking an inequality is I need to pick a number that fits the inequality. Negative 24 doesn't work for m. I need a number that is less than negative 24. Now I can see when I do my check I'm going to be dividing it by negative 4, so I want to choose a number that's less than negative 24 but also divisible by negative 4. For example, I could choose negative 28, negative 32, negative 36, negative 40. Any of those would work. So let's go ahead and say I choose negative 32. I divide it by negative 4, and I end up with positive 8 because my socks match. I know that the negatives cancel out, and I end up with 8 is greater than 6, which is true. So again, this is where you really, really need to remember your check. So go ahead, do the student practice, these 3 problems. Make sure you do your check. You will most likely get them wrong if you don't forget your check. Remember, if you're multiplying or dividing any numbers by a negative, you will need to change your sign. Okay, and one reminder with problems 2 and 3, notice it's set up as multiplication, but remember when you want to divide, you can't divide with fractions, so you have to multiply by the reciprocal. So make sure you find the reciprocal of each of these numbers and multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, go ahead and pause your video, press play when you're ready to begin. Okay, let's take a look at how you did. The first one should have been nice and easy. Multiply both sides by negative 7, which of course means we need to change the inequality. And I have n is less than negative 49. So I need to pick a number less than negative 49 that's also divisible by 7. So I could choose negative 56. I could choose negative 63, negative 70, any number like that. So I go ahead and I choose my number and I do my division. Notice my socks match, so it becomes positive, and 8 is greater than 7, which is true. Here I need to multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 1 over 5, of course, is 5 over 1, or simply 5. And I end up with y is less than or equal to 100. Remember, we weren't multiplying both sides by a negative. I wasn't moving the negative, so I don't change my sign. Now I need to choose a number less than 100. And notice I'm going to be finding a fifth of it. So I want to find something that's easy, that's smaller than 100 and easy to work with a fifth of. For example, 50, because 50 is divisible by 5. So I have 1 over 5 equals 50 over 1. I can cross cancel the 5 and the 50, and I end up with 1 times 10, which is 10 is less than or equal to 20, which is true. Remember on the check, even though I have the or equal to, I never want to use 100 because that won't help me determine my inequality sign. So that won't help me as much. Okay, on problem 3, again I want to multiply by the reciprocal, which would be negative 3 over 2. Multiply both sides by negative 3 over 2. Notice I've changed my inequality sign and I end up with k equals negative 12. Or excuse me, k is greater than negative 12. I need to choose a number that is greater than negative 12 for my check. Keep in mind, I can use any number I want. For me, the easiest number to choose would be 0, because 0, of course, is greater than negative 12. I plug my 0 in, and I find that 0 is less than 8, which is, of course, true. Okay, our last teacher example, solve the inequality using division. Notice I have negative 9 is right next to the x. When they're right next to each other, that tells me it's multiplication, so I can undo that multiplication with division. Divide both sides by negative 9. Notice I'm dividing both sides by a negative, so my inequality sign does need to change. And then 45 divided by negative 9 is 5. Now when I do my check, again, this says negative 5 is less than x. So x needs to be something larger than negative 5, which I could use 0. So I plug in my 0. 45 is greater than 0, and that is true. Okay, last student practice. Go ahead and try these 3 problems. Notice you're going to be using division on all of these. Watch out for your negatives. If you're moving your negatives, your sign changes. Okay, welcome back. Let's see how you did. We're going to divide both sides by negative 2. I end up with negative 13, and my sign did switch. I need to choose a number that's less than negative 13. And I could choose negative 14, negative 15, anything I want. In this case, I chose negative 15, and I have 26 is less than 30, which is correct. Problem number 5. I'm dividing both sides by positive 8. Now notice I'm not dividing both sides by a negative. There is a negative in the problem, but I'm not moving it, so I do not change my sign. So I end up with negative 8. For my check, I need to choose a number that's less than negative 8. For example, negative 9, negative 10, whatever I would like. And I end up with negative 72 is less than negative 64, which is true. Be careful with these negatives. This is where you're very likely to make a mistake. And this is the big difference between 6th grade and 7th grade when you're solving these inequalities. Those negatives will really mess you up, so be careful. Okay, problem number 6. I'm dividing both sides by negative 5. My negative 5's cancel out, and I'm left with a. Notice I'm dividing both sides by a negative, so I need to change my inequality sign, and I end up with a is less than or equal to negative 12. So a number less than negative 12, I could choose negative 13, negative 14, whatever I would like. And I end up with 65 is greater than or equal to 60, and that is true. Go ahead, make sure you wrote down the correct answers, and then go on to your quiz. Please do these 3 problems. Make sure you check them. You're much more likely to get it correct if you check your work. It'll only take you a second. Watch out for those inequality signs. Some of them do need to change. So be very, very careful. Okay, have a great day.